tonight's discussion will be one that's I know that hits close to home for both me and Cryptid. It's on turn-based games. With the recent, obviously, praise that Clair Obscur Expedition 33 has gotten, I had mentioned it to Cryptid that this is a damn fine game. So
the common parlance, man. It's just what we do.
Yeah, but the thing is that I've seen so many media outlets talk about this game like this is the sudden revival of turn-based games, as if they had been dead all these years, and that kind of struck a chord with me. Definitely struck a chord with Cryptid, because I mean, honestly, he plays more turn-based games and RPGs than I do, and it really stuck with us that it's like, well, that's not true. Like, how can you say that this is a revival to the genre when the past 3, 4, 5 years there have been plenty of turn-based RPGs that have been prevalent in the gaming space, that I feel it's unfair to say that this game particularly is the definitive revival, and that's not entirely true. Like, I mean, we played the
Necronomicon, as you do. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and in strange aeons even death may die. Now, the fucking core of that is that turn-based games were never gone, they were never dead, and it's really like 2 or 3 kind of posts that got traction on Twitter that really just brought around the idea of like, okay, man, Expedition 33 is really great, really good. Yeah. No one's contesting that here. I still haven't played it, just because time is ethereal and out of my hands.
Yes, we have our busy schedules, obviously.
But I have been looking forward to it since the original launch trailer. Like, it's been on my to-do list.
Actually, we've been actually looking forward to it since we saw it last year at Summer Games Fest.
Yeah.
We both saw that trailer and we're just like, we need that now.
I mean, it was definitely intriguing. It was mostly a kind of cinematic feeler reel.
Yeah, it was a showcase.
But vibe was good, and game comes out, and game is really good, and game is made by a small indie team, and that indie team is full of people who are sick of the like ins and outs of the AAA games industry, and they came together and made something that is, you know, being like a serious contender for Game of the Year.
Actually, it is. Speaking of what you just mentioned, I found out today actually only 3 members of the team were actually Ubisoft Pro devs. The rest of the people they found were like all junior devs or people who had no experience in the development space. Like, that just blows my mind. That actively blows my mind how they were able to get their resources together to put something like so beautiful together.
Yeah, we'll have the trailer playing behind us.
Yeah,
and we're just gonna mute that because I don't want to deal with copyright today.
Of course.
But yeah, no, just like this beautiful ethereal game that also just happened to be a turn-based RPG, just is immensely successful from, you know, the first drop. And, you know, a lot of people are going out of their way to try to attribute this to like, oh, well, this is what launching off of Game Pass will do. This is what, you know, the benefit of having small teams is like, oh, hey, you know, you just run with this idea. Like, they're doing so in like a kind of diminutive way. This game earned all of its praise. It's awesome. It's sold like, what was it, over 500,000, 1 million units? Something I was reading.
It's currently at over 2 million.
It's over 2. Okay, so
over 2 million currently.
And it's, you know, it's not even a traditional turn-based RPG. It kind of fits the model that Super Mario RPG did, where there are interactive aspects of it with both dodging and active time parries and So it's not like your classic Final Fantasy 1 click button do thing, enemy turn, click button do thing.
Yeah.
But
even on the
it
attack,
is an exemplar of the genre.
even in the attack portion, there is still like a little quick time event to, if you get it on a certain point, it does some damage. But if you get the perfect quick time press of it, you get the most damage out of it. So there is a lot of engagement on the attacking and defensive aspect of the gameplay.
But yeah, I mean, this idea that turn-based games are, back, or they're making a return, or anything is a complete.
I wouldn't say mockery, but
no, it's just over. It's an overstatement.
Yeah, it's a disservice to the genre itself, as if like
if we look even to last year and technically the year before, like we have like tens to hundreds of turn-based games, RPGs, JRPGs, and there's a couple that come to mind. I know that you had one. Let's bring the list up. So Clair Obscur, really great, thumbs up, recommend it 100%. But the fact that the matter is that it is not this exemplar of a return, because turn-based games never left.
Yes, and it's not to say, again, like, it's just funny because from what I've heard, from just what I've seen, people think this is so genre defining, like it's blown turn-based games into like a new direction. I'm like, no, it's just a really good turn-based game. It's got a great gameplay mechanic in terms of battles. It's got an excellent story so far. I'm only about halfway through, and I am so invested in these characters. And even from the get-go, it hits you with some raw emotions. Like, you're about to get yourself into some shit, because right off the get-go, they hit you in the emotions where they're like, yeah, this may or may not end well for them. It graphically looks so beautiful. In Unreal Engine 5, this small dev team did work. And I mean, they did work with making these environments look so lush, so beautiful. Even the darkest drab ones, you still feel like, holy crap, like it still pulls a certain emotion out of you, like, God, like there's like no life here, but you still have to make the trek through this area to get to the next checkpoint. This cityscape here at the beginning, the prologue area, it literally felt like an entire lively city, but a lively city that knew doom was about to come because of this gomage that happens, which is where you see everyone become the flower petals. So everyone's like having this celebration because it's their last moments of life for whoever's left. In this case, whoever's 33 and older gets ripped out. They just get snapped out of existence. And so everyone that's left there is just kind of having to remember them for who they were, celebrate who they were, and then boom, you make the expedition on over. So then you're just like, holy crap, like right out the get-go, you're just like, no, yeah, we have to stop this paintress if she's doing this. So it's so captivating, and these areas that you visit, it feels like each area is its own world. Like you get so engrossed, like especially meeting the NPC characters. Like there's these I guess tribal people you meet called the Gestrels. All they care about is fighting. That's all they care about. Their one thing is they love to fight, and that's it. That they love to solve everything by fighting. I'm just like, holy cow. But they love making jokes about it is another thing. Like it's like, oh, you're looking at me, you better not rob. There's one instance where you visit a house in their village, and the guy's sleeping, and he's like, you better not have just woke me up because you're gonna rob me. And so he stands up and he moves out of the doorway, and you go in, you rob him, and he's like, I knew it. And then it triggers a fight with one of the random NPCs, and I'm like, that's so awesome. Like those are little things and little moments that you're just like, yeah, they make the world feel alive.
So I don't have the same degree of investment in the actual like narrative of the story because I haven't started playing it yet, but functionally I can from the outset you can tell that the key points on like what is great about Expedition 33 is that it is a unique intellectual property. It is a new title, it is a new game. It is not derivative of any one particular thing. It is bringing a really strong narrative that with a well-written world setting, strong interpersonal narratives, and like just looking from the trailer, an amazing degree of world and creature design, and it's again made by a small team. There's no you do not get that sense of like, oh hey, here's an idea that was presented initially and then had to be compromised for the sake of either expediting release or appealing to a broader mass. No, this is a game that exists and is successful because it is a unique thing and it is allowed to be itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Could you imagine like these guys had a job over at Ubisoft and they left because they're like, we're bored, we're not doing anything here. We want to create.
Yeah, I think it was a quote from the director, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a straight up quote from the director that said he left Ubisoft because he was bored and he wanted to make a game of his own without all the, you know, political contention of like getting things approved. No, he just said, I want to make this game and I'm gonna do it. And don't even get me started on the music. The music to this game, dude, if you even just listen to the OST on Spotify or anything, it magical. It's one of my favorite OSTs so far. Like I listen to that on repeat.
The end point of that quote is saying that if they had tried to make this game the way that they did, if they had to deal with the internal politics of the development studio they were originally working for, the game wouldn't be made within 25 years.
Yeah,
and that might be just like overzealous, overestimation for the sake of making that point. But at the end of the day, like, no, this game would not exist as it is were it not released in the under the circumstances that it did.
Yeah, in the terms of like the traditional big business where they have to go through approvals and they have to pass it through this committee and through this, and you know, then it has to get a certain amount of votes for it to even go into pre-production, not even pre-production, just writing
production,
the production,
any kind of approval for anything. I mean, writing by committee is the death of creativity. It's how you get games like what was that thing that came out on PS5 where the original trailer looked really great and then it came out and the writing was so terrible that everyone just vomited all over the floor? Forsaken?
Oh yeah, the Square Enix game. Yeah,
Forsaken. It was just like the initial gameplay trailer and like world setting trailer looked really cool, and then you look to this like really low, like D tier Joss Whedon-esque fucking banter dialogue, and it just completely destroyed any kind of momentum that game had.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, Expedition 33 did remind me of another game that came out not too long ago that was just, it hit a lot of those same points. I'll just minimize that for a second.
It was just last year, wasn't it?
1-2 years ago, roughly a year and a half. That would be the Thaumaturge, which is also a turn-based. It is somewhat similar to Clair Obscur. Yeah. But it's a slightly more realistic approach. It has, it's not, breaking any molds when it comes to graphical fidelity, but it looks good. It's also a small team, but it's a Eastern European style, like very Slavic coded game that plays into like folklore, and it's essentially like it's not too far off of a Persona, like that's the thing that comes to mind, because you're basically chaining these ghosts to be how you fight off other supernatural happenings, and your role as the Thaumaturge is to kind of do what you would expect a like an exorcist to do. Again, creature design's really good, original concept.
Yeah, I was about to say, this creature right here that's on the screen on the trailer, that looks
this is
impressive.
a enemy that you invoke into your service. I only got like a good 2/3 of the way into the game. I've been wanting to come back with it and play it on stream.
Yeah. I can kind of see how you make the comparison to Expedition. Even some of the like visually, like the style of like the clothing and the setting looks pretty damn close to Expedition 33.
Yeah, where people compare Expedition 33 to JRPGs and that it's like a French JRPG, like a JRPG. This would be like J with an umlaut.
Oh, Jesus
I don't know if
Christ.
that's a thing, but this is very, very Slavic.
No, it's like J and then silent letters in between RPG.
Yeah, like 14 different
vowels and
anyway,
consonants.
It's a really interesting game, and it didn't get a lot of the press that a lot of what you saw with Expedition 33, but like the gameplay is just as solid. You're dealing with like a really heavily social focused like kind of interaction system where you need to channel your spirits and level up your character in a particular way to appeal to people in a different style or setting. There's different character builds depending on how you want to push a particular situation. Like you can go more socially focused and like gain powers that can help you influence conversations to go a particular way. Or you can just make your murder ghosts really murder ghosty. It's awesome.
Yes.
The game could definitely run a little better, but the core narrative is super on point. And it's one that I would like 100% recommend. I'm planning on streaming this at some point. But yeah, no, it reminded me when people were having this conversation about the return to turn-based RPGs. It's like, man, this is one that immediately came out. This is and it's not too dissimilar in art style.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this game didn't get any of the love that game did.
And then that's such a like it's sad to see that, because you're like, these games are great and they deserve praise, but it's just because people just tend to sleep on the genre, because as we've heard it before, people are like, turn-based is dead, they're boring games. A lot of these games get passed up because of that, and it's just like these games have just as compelling stories, and the same thing is on par of like what AAA games do with their visuals, their music, their gameplay, their characters. Because this game graphically looks
when you look at what we would call like a AA indie game, something that has comparably high graphical fidelity, but ultimately is made by a small team or has a smaller budget, or any number of
that's what things. I was gonna say. What does define AA? Is it because of graphically how it looks, or budget wise?
I think it's just budget, honestly. I think the difference between calling something an indie game and calling something like a AA game, AA is just like kind of a pompous title. It's like if this game were made by a major studio, we would call it AAA, because it would take 10 times the budget to get this thing to look the way it does with a larger studio. But yeah, I mean, what we consider AAA, or what the industry considers AAA, is just really the only defining factor is bloated budgets. That's it.
Okay.
Like, oh hey, did it cost $500 million for you to put out the last Call of Duty game? Yeah, that's a AAA game. Did this indie darling take like $6 million to make over the course of like however many years? Yeah, but also it's just as good, if not better. There's more like narrative merit in this game than I would say the last 10 major like big studio first person shooters that have come out in the last 5 years.
You're all right about that.
But yeah, I mean, I think it comes with a falling attention span that people don't like dealing, or like the idea that people don't like dealing with turn-based games. It just comes with this generic idea of like who your core audience is, like who the core audience of gamers is in the long term. Like, are you going to have the same install base that fucking FIFA or Call of Duty have? No, obviously not. When you look at turn-based games, they really kind of focus into a particular niche. It's either a deep set groove by long-running series or franchises, or it's trying to cut a new piece of the pie out of people who are like starved for narrative.
Yeah.
And that's where games like this come in.
Now, this may sound like a hot take, but I feel when it comes to games like this, for instance, for like turn-based RPGs or RPGs in general, I feel that audience is more willing to open up and expand their repertoire of games, whether it's AAA to AA to indie, over fans of gaming. Like, I mean, for instance, like for sports games or shooters, for instance, Call of Duty fans. I feel like for them, Call of Duty is the maximum, and there's no other shooter game out there.
I feel
like it would not be. It would like not be
into the conversation that we've had about hero shooters being the new hotness, or you know, a couple years ago, people were all trying to jump onto the battle royale scene, and everyone failed because you can't beat Fortnite, and the fact that they have licensing agreements with every major media franchise on the planet.
That's true.
It's just pursuing the lowest common denominator because that's going to give them the highest output, and it's also lower effort. If you don't have to workshop the writing in the media property you're putting out, then you can focus more on like exploitative gambling mechanics in your loot boxes and what's going to make you the most millions of dollars at the end of the day. It doesn't matter whether or not there's any kind of merit or value in the product itself. It doesn't matter if it's making a definitive stance or statement on something, or even fucking telling a story at all, as long as, you know, you're making all of your exploitation money back.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, Thaumaturge does look interesting. I've personally, again, never played it. I've only seen you like start it up, but it does look interesting though. Like, I feel like it'd be something I would like to give a try, just to get the experience out of it.
I mean, for anyone who does appreciate like this era and history and time frame, like literally you walk into a village and then solve a ghost problem and basically make a deal with the devil with literally Rasputin.
Yeah, easy peasy.
Like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that, and like it gives that old Grimm's fairy tales level of darkness in the creature design and how they appear and how they affect the world around them. But yeah, I mean that's the other half of it, is like every time the further into a particular niche you go, the less output you're going to get from it. Unless you just make something that is so immensely novel that it captures people's interest regardless of what they care for. Like, there's a whole bunch of people who, like, the whole core of the opinion that turn-based RPGs are back is that there's a huge part of the demographic that just doesn't play turn-based RPGs because they're not willing to put 140 hours into clear, you know, Persona 5 or fucking Metaphor ReFantazio. Because that's what a typical full playthrough costs time-wise.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, not all RPGs, obviously, or not all turn-based RPGs are that long, but
yeah,
some of the bigger ones on average, yes, they do tend to be like 60 plus hours, and you know, that's if you just want to beat the base game. Yeah, that's also the other thing.
Time is
money. You
want
to put in time. Yeah. So, but yeah, and then again, this was an impressive game for a small studio, an indie studio here. moving forward, my next choice of it's actually another indie game as well, would be Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars was a RPG, a turn-based RPG that was such a callback to the Super Nintendo era for me, because there's so much in this game that just reminded me of that era of gaming when I first started experiencing turn-based RPGs. For instance, like Chrono Trigger, you had Final Fantasy VI, Illusions of Gaia, Secret of Mana. This game has something that sparked that like childhood me again. Like when I was experiencing those games for the first time ever, this game gave me that exact sensation as I did back then. Graphically, obviously, yes, it's not gonna be the prettiest, but it's not supposed to be. It's stuck in that, what is it, the 16-bit, 32-bit era of gaming.
You know, I refute the idea that this is not like a 16-bit game cannot be as beautiful or more artistically valuable than Unreal Engine hyper-realistic art style.
Of course, I'm not trying to degrade the art style, but I'm just saying, like, graphically, it's not going to be something that people are going to look at and be like, wow, this is pushing the limits. It's like, no, this is a nod to that era of gaming. So for instance, like starting it up, like just you start off as these little kids, as most of these RPGs, in some random village where they later find out they're actually like gifted heroes, and now they have to make this journey. But what I really loved about it, again going back to the gameplay, is that it gave me a mix of Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana more than anything, because you roll around with this party, obviously, and I love the combo attacks.
Also
that you
on the 2 playlist, so gameplay wise, it's a little closer to Chrono Trigger, where it's a little like it's a hybrid ATB system.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, though, it still has this combination attack mechanic where it's like your attacks, you can bounce off of one of your party members to make the attack stronger, or certain attacks, if you time them correctly, because there's certain attacks that you do have to time, they bounce between the enemies. So I forget what the character's name is, but he throws like almost like a shuriken type weapon, and it can bounce between enemies if you time it correctly, back and forth. And then with the most recent update too, why I said it reminded me of Secret of Mana as well, is that in the most recent update they added co-op. So you, with the DLC, you and a friend can actually experience it all together, just like Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is like, oh yeah, you can each play your own character, control them, and it just gave me that like childhood sensation when I first got to experience, the Super Nintendo, and my first real experience of RPGs. That's what this game hit for me. But and all that aside, it just is an amazing game to play. The story is fantastic, and I would highly recommend it to anyone. Like all the games we're gonna talk about, for the most part, except for the ones that we're gonna actually not badmouth, but have a disagreement with. I would always highly recommend. I would highly recommend everyone tries these just to try. Let's see, like for instance, right there, that attack where it was bouncing off the enemies, like so you could fire the shuriken, hit an enemy, when it comes back to you, if you time it correctly, it bounces off to another enemy, so on and so forth. And the cool thing is that can go on for quite some time, except it gets faster every time it comes back to you, so your reaction time has to be a lot quicker. But just looking at the game itself, I was so blown away.
Integrating skill into what otherwise would be just click a button to do a thing style of game.
Exactly. And then there are like break mechanics too, where it's like, oh, certain attacks you have to do to break an enemy's guard, and it's just like, these are things you really have to think about, because you're not just gonna brute force your way through this. I feel like sometimes that's a misconception where people are like, oh, you just click attack and that's it, like you're just gonna get through it. And I'm like, no, there's a lot of thought in like a process of how you want to approach certain enemies. This game does push that limit where it's like certain enemies can only be broke by a certain attack, and you have to have a certain amount of AP points, or essentially mana points, to do said attacks, because then they end up being combo attacks. And again, this game just floored me from the get-go, because immediately when I saw it, the first thing that went through my head, I was just like, this is Chrono Trigger. but like new
I
age
mean,
Chrono
it's an
Trigger.
evolution of Chrono Trigger. It's like what your brain remembers Chrono Trigger being, as opposed to what Chrono Trigger actually was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so immediately I was so drawn to this, and even when I like just first fired it up, I was playing it, and I was like, my God, I was so invested from the get go that I didn't want to put the game down. And for me, that usually is that to me is what matters most. Is like if you can keep me that engaged, where I'm like, I can't stop thinking about the game. I need to keep playing. I want to see what happens next. That for me, I'm just like, that is a game. That is a winner. Regardless of whatever else may happen or whatever other people really think. But for me personally, those are the type of games that I've always, and this is why I've always been so drawn to turn-based RPGs, because the stories are usually so engaging. They make you fall in love with like certain characters. Maybe not all of them, but you'll end up being attached to a group of characters or one character, and you're like, I have to see their story out. You know, I have to see what happens to this person in the end.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the point of utilizing turn-based RPGs as a format, is that you're less so worried about, you know, your the fidelity of your gameplay or the concept of multiplayer as a whole, so that you can use the art and whatever writing you want to focus on to create a story, and create a unique enough story that it doesn't necessarily matter that the gameplay is simpler or doesn't have the same degree of technological complexity, or, you know, is pushing whatever boundary, because ultimately it is serving as a platform for a story to be told.
Mm-hmm. And then I don't know if you saw right there. Actually, I don't know why it didn't occur to me before. The composer to this game was the composer of Chrono Trigger and Xenogears.
Yeah, they straight up did get Mitsuda, right?
Yeah, which again, both of those games mean so much to me, because I played both of them all the way through. Played them all throughout my childhood. So just hearing that music again also brings back that familiarity to that era of me in that time frame of gaming, where I'm like, yeah, this feels familiar to me, and it's a great sensation to have.
Well, I feel like, if anything, the concept of the spiritual successor is in and of itself proof that a particular genre not like has merit and should still be around, because it is focusing on the fact that people want something so badly, and they are not receiving that, they're not fulfilling that want, or the industry is not fulfilling that want, so they go out of their way to create that thing for themselves, because the industry has failed to do so. I mean, that's the call to action of being a creative. It's the reason that I went back to school, to improve, you know, my base writing skills, because ultimately there's stories that I keep looking for that I can't find anywhere else, so ultimately it becomes my responsibility to make those stories happen. And that's the same thing for people who are bringing back the subgenres or styles of gameplay that are just not being fulfilled by the industry, because we're just subject to this communal gaslighting, because it doesn't serve, you know, the shareholders' interest to put effort into making the products that you're making.
Yeah, that's a fair evaluation of that.
Yeah. Let me. I don't know why that's happening. But yeah, no. So,
actually, did you ever play Sea of Stars?
I played the first 2 hours of it, and I failed to get back to it.
Gotcha. No, I was gonna say, I was like, I don't know, because that was another game I know we had talked about, but I never knew if you actually went to play it or attempted to.
I wanted to, and I watched a couple streams of the game later on, but I haven't played through the second half.
Also, I know something we haven't mentioned in the few games. Can I just tell you how much I love overworld traversal in RPGs? I absolutely love the way you like travel in Expedition 33 and Sea of Stars, and most of the games that we're going to be playing today, or we're going to discuss today. I love when you go out into the world and they make it feel like there's a world. Like you see this full-on map and you're like, oh, there's that location. It lets you travel around and you get to explore the overworld.
So this is like one of my favorite terms that I constantly use, and it makes me sound like a pompous asshole, but this is an aspect of what we would call ludonarrative resonance or ludonarrative synchronicity. It's where the gameplay and the narrative line up to reiterate each other. So when you're dealing with a lot of RPGs are going to follow your traditional hero's story, and that requires some degree of going about a journey and setting out into the world, having a rise and fall and denouement, conflict, and eventual return to home as a changed person. I'm missing a couple of points, but that's the basic hero story.
Fair.
You like to be able to actually see the world pass you by and see your progress not only as a person but as a character, and the development of the world mirroring your own experience and mirroring your own development and maturity, or at least the characters. That is a huge aspect of ludonarrative resonance. And for games that, don't necessarily provide that focus, you can still achieve that, but it's something that, like, the reason that we don't skip over all of the Knights of Camping when we're talking about the Lord of the Rings and how, oh yeah, no, you start at the Shire, you end at Mount Doom, is because that's the story, that's the point. So seeing the world shift every step you take, every random attack battle that you go through, and then seeing the world shift and change to reciprocate what the state of the overall state of the world narratively, to see that, like, to actually see that visually helps reiterate what the narrative is trying to tell you.
Yeah,
strengthens the point ultimately. But yeah, the next point on the docket is ultimately just, I mean, we're focusing a little bit on the industry. There really is just this community-wide gaslighting that, the want for turn-based games isn't there, and I've always disagreed with it. Yes, is there a huge audience for more action-oriented games? Of course. There's, again, lowest common denominator. The easier the entry point is for anything, the more people are going to like the thing. But just because, like, it's a really cynical outlook to say that, oh, we don't trust our audience to have the attention span to read through a novel's worth of dialogue and have to interact with different statuses and do the math themselves when it comes to action combat or turn-based combat, how to best effectively tackle a particular problem. Like, because it's not just hitting the attack button, it's part of the game to focus on how to best optimize what you're doing.
Of course.
The whole reason status screens exist is so that you can make decisions to force, how your character plays one way or another. It depends on the game, obviously, but the industry doesn't trust you to do that, and there's no way for them to exploit it if we want to be really cynical. Unless you're looking at the Ubisoft or Destiny style of gameplay, where it's like, oh, well, we're going to create a fake problem to sell you a solution with loot boxes and the micro economies.
Actually, I wanted to ask you just a quick, like, short little side note. Personally, do you prefer an RPG where the stats go up automatically on a character, or do you prefer to allocate the stats yourself?
I prefer a hybridized RPG, where you have guaranteed stat increases based off of a particular facet of the game, but then there is a degree of stat increase that is up to you. If we go back to Chrono Trigger, you don't have to use all the ability tabs on Chrono, but everybody knows you're going to use every ability tab on Chrono. He's the main character.
True. He's the one that
so a little bit like
supposed
that.
to survive.
On the flip side, I really am not a fan of the way that a certain other game that we will bring up after the fact, the way that Pokemon does it, where EV and IV values are semi-randomized depending on whether or not you focus specific combat interactions.
Yeah.
Like, you only get certain EVs from dealing with certain Pokemon in certain settings. I think that system sucks. And it leads to the competitive scene being like toxic as hell and full of people who are just genning their own perfect IV, perfect EV,
that's
maxed out Pokemon. And the people who actually put the effort in or try to just use what they got throughout their personal
journey
playthrough, left in the dust because they didn't spend 2,000 hours min-maxing a legitimate perfect IV starter Pokemon, we did roll over one other thing that I want to go back to, though. I think the best, we're talking about recent games that are like the exemplar of an exemplar of the genre. And I think that it's impossible to talk about turn-based games or JRPGs as... this isn't exclusively JRPGs. JRPGs do have a tendency to take up a large portion of the turn-based game space, because that's the overlap. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
But I think it's impossible to talk about this without mentioning Metaphor ReFantazio. That game is amazing. It has won, a whole bunch of different... It won Best Narrative at the Game Awards last year. It got snuffed for Best Soundtrack.
Yep. Won Best RPG. It actually won Best RPG.
Yes. But ultimately, this game is... It's usually really trite to essentially write about writing. So to make an RPG that is about RPG mechanics, that is a meta-narrative about the greater state of what turn-based RPGs have been, and will evolve to be, and what you need, like how the player needs to interact with them to progress in the way that the simultaneous stagnancy and evolution of the genre has forced them to kind of interact. Getting too ahead of myself, Metaphor ReFantazio is the first true fantasy game made by the team at Atlas behind Persona 3, 4, and 5. People will argue this is Persona 6. It is its own thing, don't worry about it, except there's a lot of stuff in here that maybe if you played Shin Megami Tensei 5 and Soul Hackers 1 and all of the Persona games, you would appreciate the reference to, but ultimately every aspect of this game stands on its own. This is a game about stories. This is a game about role-playing games. It takes the Persona dynamic of, standard RPG battles, except your specialized powers and abilities are determined by whatever archetype your character embodies the most. An archetype, for those who don't know, because it's a 50-cent word in any word challenge, is just the exemplar of an idea. So the archetypical warrior is, you look at Guts from Berserk. He is the archetypical warrior, big sword.
It's essentially like the job system from like Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, the job system represents archetypes of a particular style of character. And the assassin class is the archetypical assassin. You're going to have the guy who's light leather armor, uses either throwing knives or shuriken or daggers or poison or whichever. So you're replacing the Persona system where in Persona, the powers are representative of the facade that the Persona user maintains to face themselves and the difficulties of life. And in Metaphor, archetypes are just, you exemplify this one ideal so viscerally that you're able to manifest it as like this magical force and power. Now that's what it is in a narrative sense. Ultimately, the characters that represent a particular archetype are that archetype. Your magician or Yusuke stand-in is the warrior. He is the standard warrior, but his actual character goes above and beyond that. Stroll as a character is much more complex than what his archetype would infer.
Stroll is the guy that wears that guy right there.
Yeah, he's that guy right there.
Okay.
He's the one with the horns who looks like Yu Narukami from Persona 4.
Yeah. I was like, you kind of have to forgive me because I didn't play the game. Like, I only saw some of the demo, so some of the character names.
I'm also trying not to go too hard into spoilers. But the thing about the archetype system is that eventually your characters have to start branching out beyond their own archetypes to become effective in battle. So there are weaknesses that your archetype will have that if you put effort and experience into a different, usually opposite archetype, it will allow you to cover the balances not only from a statistical point of view with how your character builds as they level up, but also like in abilities. So I think it's like the easiest example is the main character is the Seeker, or the stand-in for the Fool in any Persona game.
Yeah.
They have a focus that is they have a strength in wind magic, but a weakness to electricity magic. But if you level into, I don't remember which one it is specifically, but if you level into either mage or knight or something, one of those classes gives you a passive ability that resists that weakness that you can then carry over back to your original archetype branch. So if you, as a character, expand outside of the expectations of your role, you can become a stronger character. This is another huge example of Ludo narrative resonance.
You see
that synchronicity.
The rewards, or you see the growth.
The gameplay informs the narrative. Because ultimately you see that your growth as a character, your ability to exemplify this archetype and to branch into an archetype that is not yours to make up for your own weaknesses, is in and of itself proof that your character is growing both from a numbers and values set, but also narratively, you are growing as a person. You are becoming stronger. You are covering for old weaknesses. You are increasing. The protagonist increases personal stat values similar to how you would in your regular Persona games. You can only be so charming before you're able to do a particular thing. You can only be so courageous before you can go after a particular quest. But all of this is about growth, and it both a commentary on the expectations of what turn-based RPGs are and what JRPGs are, because Atlus and the Shin Megami Tensei franchise and the team behind that series is like, this is where you are getting the basic expectation for how these games will play. How turn-based games evolve usually coincides with Shin Megami Tensei games. A lot of people like Pokemon and think that that's its own system. Pokemon stole its battle system from Megami Tensei.
Yeah.
The monster capturing system existed in the recruitment system, essentially, existed way earlier than Pokemon Red and Green or Red and Blue on the American side.
Tensei 1 was on Nintendo before Pokemon was even an idea.
Or before even Shin Megami Tensei. Megami Tensei.
Yeah, Megami Tensei, yeah.
God of Incarnation is the origin of that gameplay mechanic. And people attribute it to Pokemon so heavily that the Pokemon company is able to win lawsuits against copycats. about how their gameplay mechanics are in and of themselves representative of the intellectual property.
Patented game mechanics. So stupid.
It's dumb. But Metaphor is really great, and it takes... I will recommend this game 110% with a huge asterisk, being that it is a huge time investment, and it can be really frustrating. Because at the end of the day, this is an Atlas RPG, which means it's going to take 140 hours to clear your first playthrough if you care. Yeah. But this is, like, the one criticism I'll have of this game is that in a standard difficulty increase over the course of a game, you're expecting a slope. You're expecting an even line going from, you know, your 0-0 mark to your positive XY coordinate. You want a pretty even slope, or even, like, you know, a slope that gives you a little more time to become like a powerhouse.
It's like a gradual increase.
Yeah, this game is not a single line on a graph. This game's difficulty pacing is a staircase. You will hit a wall, and then you will have to ascend straight up before you can progress. Then you will go forward, and it will be fucking easy street until you hit the next wall. And then you will rinse repeat. And the answers to the difficulty will become more and more complex as the different systems in this game reveal themselves. And again, not going to go into specific spoilers, but the last 2 or 3 characters introduce new mechanics that completely invert how you play the game up until that point.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's no longer even about... I'm talking about the Masked Dancer and the Summoner, which are 2 classes that are... There's like 40-something individual classes in the game that are represented in archetypes that are the top or bottom of a particular branch. Those 2 classes integrate different grindable resources to unlock different accessories that accessories or passive upgrades that differentiate what you can do with the class. The Masked Dancer allows you to create mask accessories that are only equipable when you have that archetype active, and they just give you a different archetype's moveset, like the whole thing. Like you can have Masked Dancer, and then you can make the archetype for the Magic Knight, and then you have all of the moves of the Magic Knight, including some of the passives. Oh. But you also gain elemental strengths and weaknesses depending on what you pick. So there are safer bets that have less elemental weaknesses or less common elemental weaknesses.
Yeah.
But they also usually have higher cost abilities that become more difficult to use. But yeah, I mean,
that almost sounds like the Mimic class from the Final Fantasy.
It might be representing that, and the evolution of that class may or may not be called the Persona User.
Of course.
Like, literally. But, I mean, there's a whole bunch of referential stuff to Atlas's own properties, but, I mean, the archetype system is just all of the fantasy classes all rolled into a different context, and some would say actually a stronger context, because they are in and of themselves a meta reference, and how they're used and how you can subvert certain systems within the game by like going out of your way to combine certain items or certain abilities. Like there's a couple of secret super bosses that you can just like completely nullify their entire moveset for 1 or 2 characters and destroy the combat system, because much like Shin Megami Tensei, this game uses a slightly altered version of Atlas's press turn system. This is a turn-based RPG, but if you play smart, you're able to gain more turns. Or if you trap your enemies into if you learn their movesets or learn their abilities, you can force them into making bad moves, which makes them lose turns.
Actually, speaking on that mechanic, I actually really enjoy that mechanic much more than I do in RPGs, where it's like, oh, if your stat is just faster, you go more times. I always love that mechanic from like the Shin Megami Tensei games and Persona games, that if you hit the enemy with the right elemental, or if you break their defense, you in turn get more turns and it delays the enemies. But accordingly, it's also the reverse, because if the enemies hit you with like that, then they get extra turns. And I've always loved that type of mechanic. Or it's
So
like, it
Atlas
grants
games
you-
also do that thing where stats actually matter. It's not just a matter of whether or not one stat is bigger than the enemy's stat. It's straight up like buffs and debuffs actually make the difference in these games, and you can actively apply statuses to boss monsters. Which good luck doing that in a Final Fantasy. Like just to give you the big secondary like biggest contemporary.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing with Final Fantasy bosses is they're completely immune to half of that shit, so there's really no reason to like level into that. It's such a trope, it's such a meme trope that there are like meta-referential anime series that are just like, well, why would I focus on status inflicting when I can just hit things hard, and then the main character is super overpowered because they can just do statuses to anybody.
Yeah. Or the one other thing I know Final Fantasy is also notorious of, they have that stupid gimmick boss where it's like, oh yeah, just hit it with a Phoenix Down or an X potion, it automatically kills it because they're
you know what?
undead
No,
or they're
I will
zombies.
fight. I will fight for the zombie status. The zombie status is my favorite fucking thing because it means that if you hoard max potions, that you can just knock the fucking boss out in 2 rounds.
Absolutely.
I'm calling out Final Fantasy X specifically.
Yeah, I know which boss you're talking about.
There are a couple towards the end where it's like they either have zombie inflicted or you can inflict zombie on them.
Yeah, like that's
then,
like the only exception to Final Fantasy, because other than that, most bosses are always immune to statuses, and they'll have their one elemental.
Final Fantasy X is my favorite.
The one elemental weakness, if that. Unlike, like when I first played Nocturne, and we all know that first notorious boss fight against the Matador, you actively had to have someone constantly just buffing your team, debuffing.
There's a 9 in 10 chance that you lose the first fight in the game. In that game, it's so good. I love it.
Absolutely, it's absolutely. But that's the type of difficulty though that makes it fun to learn the way the game is intended to be played. Or I shouldn't say intended, but it makes you learn to think of strategies like, well, trying to brute force this clearly isn't going to work. How can I get around
so
this?
I can go into the systems of like what Metaphor does. Metaphor is like what if you played Death Stranding, you would have fallen into the mindset of understanding Hideo Kojima's obsession with double entendres, or triple entendres, or septuple entendres. The game is a metaphor. The game is a fucking metaphor. Every aspect of the game has a narrative resonant point being made, and that includes gameplay.
Okay.
So very similar. It's something that it's hard to recommend a multi-100-hour RPG. Also, there's a real secret super boss that you have to fight in New Game Plus, and that means a minimum of 200-hour time investment. That's really hard to sell to people, but this game is amazing. This game is going to do things that other things can only dream of.
I feel like sometimes that's only for the hardcore fans, because there are times even for me, I'm just like, I'd rather just go through and play it through. I don't have that kind of time to go through everything again to reach a certain point to fight a super boss. I'd rather just enjoy my first. Yeah, I mean, again, but even then,
because with this 150 hours, I could go and play a different hyper RPG.
Because it's just like, it's one of those, it's like, that's just an extra if you want to, but even on your first playthrough, you can still thoroughly enjoy the game and get a full story out of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
it's not like you need to play it again to get a different...
There's always, especially in Atlas RPGs, there's always reasons to go back and do their New Game Plus. options whenever they're present, because there's either things that did not exist in the first version of the game, or you're just going to steamroll everything so hard that it's going to be really fun to go back through and do in 25 hours what took you 150 to get done.
Yeah.
But time investment.
That's always the big thing.
To quote the great Dean Kamen, the creator of the Segway, time investment is hard to sell, much like the rest of games, which is why, much like turn-based RPGs are difficult to sell to the same degree that live-action games as a service schlock is. I feel like the biggest part of why we think that, or quote unquote, why the greater public thinks that turn-based RPGs are dead is because we've been communally gaslit by a couple of people within the industry. My biggest sources of blame point to Keiji Inafune.
Okay.
A guy who was made notable for the Mighty Number 9 and also being a producer on Mega Man, not a creator. Let's not mix that up.
Yeah, that's true.
He made this huge push in the early aughts for Western style games to be made by Japanese developers. That the Western style action games were the way of the future. And this was reciprocated by a couple of key players over in Square Enix.
Yep.
I mean, ultimately, I think it just kind of coincided with after Final Fantasy X, certain devs just did not want to make turn-based RPGs because they couldn't think of new ways to spin on it.
Yeah.
And so we've just been, and ultimately, this benefited American publishers like EA and Activision, because they were the biggest proprietors of easy turnaround schlock, or the yearly release of, hey, we're going to sell you literally the same game again and not change anything, and actually legit forget to change the number in the title menu until a day one patch.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Look at you, FIFA 24.
Let's not even overlook Ubisoft as well with the yearly Assassin's Creed as well. They were also guilty of that too.
Super, super cynical, because I feel like you can tie in the death of the Assassin's Creed games narratively with that as well, because Assassin's Creed 1 and every part of Assassin's Creed 2 were all really involved in their narrative. And then Assassin's Creed 3 did a lot of work to kill that narrative.
Whoa.
To make a kind of the justification of a yearly franchise out of the thing, even though you can't. And Assassin's Creed 4 just was really good gameplay wise.
True.
So people are like, oh, hey, maybe there's a point to this style of game still being around, but no,
it wasn't.
Every single game that's come out since then has proven that is not the case. That 4 was a fluke.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So Ubisoft, Activision, EA, they're all benefiting from the idea that narrative games are dead and that the focus is on multiplayer, because that's the easiest way to sell extra shit on top of your initial purchase.
Yeah. I mean, even
the era of DLC and all of this garbage that we're dealing with today.
I was about to mention, even action games started getting guilty about selling the rest of the game as a DLC. Look at Capcom. They did that with Asura's Wrath. And then I just felt like there were certain games that were unnecessary that did they just added DLC just because it's well, we can sell it. It's a profit. We just add this on. That is just why? Just make a full game. You don't need to piecemeal it anymore.
So I think the most egregious part of this era is EA's acquisition of BioWare. BioWare kind of skirts the main idea that we're dealing with here with turn-based games.
Yeah.
And That's more CRPGs is their wheelhouse. But at the end of the day, it's still the dynamic shift from RPG focuses to non-RPG schlock, like these hybrid action games that were coming out basically post Mass Effect 1.
Yeah.
Because you're going from the original Baldur's Gate games and Baldur's Gate 2 and the Star Wars KOTOR games, and that era just dying out when the company that owned BioWare went on. They went under in the sense that EA bought all of the rights for all of their properties out from under them.
Yeah.
And that's when you see the dynamic shift is the launch of Mass Effect. And Mass Effect was super successful because it was a traditional fantasy RPG, but just in space. They flipped the SFF, the sci-fi fiction script, to push for a new narrative that they sold the idea of narrative more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it coincided with another standard, this is another big conversation that we might have later, but Dragon Age Origins came out around the same time that Mass Effect 2 did, and it became kind of the test bed for the shift towards an action RPG, that the kind of dynamic that Mass Effect was pushing. And the good CRPG parts of Dragon Age are great until you get to the bad action parts that were implemented after the fact, mostly in Dragon Age 2, as a result of Mass Effect's 2 success, and its shift towards essentially a cover shooter, while still having a standard RPG narrative and selling the importance of your decisions and how things will translate from point A to point B between the games. Like, your narrative decisions will matter.
Of course.
But I blame Mass Effect for Dragon Age getting the can. But yeah, are there any industry things that you wanted to?
Yeah,
because I can be cynical all day.
Well, I know that, of course. That's part of your Miranda. No, I mean, for me, again, because it's been such a series in my life, and it's one of my favorite of all time. For me, it was the shift of turn-based in Final Fantasy. Like, personally for me, and as we've discussed before, personally for me, I felt Final Fantasy changing from turn-based to whatever it's trying to be in terms of action-based was somewhat of a mistake.
I mean, as much as we can look back with a little bit of high regard for Final Fantasy X-2,
yeah, and that's the one, yeah.
With context,
that's the shift that I'm talking about.
Because FF10 is like my favorite Final Fantasy, and I know that that's not. People will argue with me on that, and it's whatever. It's just the one that I care the most about. But it's also like the defining line between when Final Fantasy shifted from the best version of its turn-based system to the worst version of its ATB system.
Yes, absolutely.
Let me see if I can bring that up.
Like, going from Final Fantasy X, you're like, okay, this game's amazing. You love how the action works. You love how the gameplay works. You're switching party members out. You're going through this whole turn-based thing. You're like, okay, you're planning things out. Then they announce X-2, and you're like, oh crap, the first Final Fantasy to get a sequel. And then suddenly you see the gameplay, and you're like, this isn't exactly what I was thinking it was gonna be, because you really just thought you were gonna get more of 10. Like, I honestly thought that's what it was going to be.
A sequel to 10. You're hanging out with some of the same characters, even though some of them have changed and they're new characters, and the world state is really weird.
And then you finally get in, and it's like, oh, it's active time battle. And mind you, This is before the HD remastered or remixed versions. The active time battle you couldn't change in the original. It was active time battle. In the HD remix or the HD remasters, they went and
It
changed
becomes
that where
ATB with pause.
yeah, you can keep it ATB active, or you could put ATB with a pause, meaning whenever the gauges for everyone fills, the enemies stop attacking until you take your turns. But in the original release, it was if you were trying to think about your moves on the fly and you're taking your time, the enemy's still kicking your ass. That by the time you even make a decision, you're probably already dead. And again, of course, people are going to be like, well, just get good. Just learn your attacks ahead of time. It's like, no, not everyone's going to be able to think about that. Not everyone's going to be able to adjust to that. Like
the whole point of playing a role-playing game is for you to think analytically and take into consideration all of the new aspects of what the new situation you're dealing with is.
yes.
Why would I not want to take my time? Why would I'm being put against the clock? It's that extra stress timer that really just kind of ruins.
And then from there, it's like it never went back. Because then you get an even, I wouldn't even say better version, but somewhat better version in Final Fantasy XII's gameplay. But even then, that just felt weird to play too. Because it's not like you're really controlling. Because you can honestly set that game to just auto and the game controls itself as long as you have the right moves. But
I mean, I
really
think
that.
that at least the re-release of Echoes of the Zodiac Age it does give you a more traditional Final Fantasy kind of
Yes.
degree of control.
Yes.
But it does feel like this is the first game coming out after a major MMO release, because it was FF11 was an MMO,
that is true.
and FF12 feels like they were taking notes from the MMO. So you're dealing with a kind of hybrid system that doesn't super work.
Yeah, it felt like half point and click, where it's like you take your character, then you use your little thing to look at whatever character you want to attack. Then they like walk in that path. Like it literally felt like an offline MMO where your characters could separately walk in different paths if you had them attack different enemies. That it just felt so weird to control. Like it wasn't
I need to
action
replay
oriented.
12,
But
honestly.
it wasn't really fully a turn-based as well, because at some point, if you don't make any decisions, they just default to just attacking. Like an MMO, they just go back into a standard attack, just slash, until you bring up the menu again to be like, okay, use this skill. And then you go to the other character, you can use this skill on this enemy. And that just felt... And then we make the jump to 13. And 13, I'm just like, that game I don't even want to get into, because and it doesn't feel like Final Fantasy jumps into action until 15, and even then 15 was
And
still
there's problems with 15.
Base 15, yes. Royal Edition, I will stand by, that's the one you want to play. But even then, that didn't feel fully action oriented, because it's like you still have to decide what you're doing. It's not like you're just being able to do combos on the fly. Like you still
It's
had
like,
a menu.
what if Kingdom Hearts 2's combat system wasn't as good feeling and also had other menu shit forced into it? I am still ambivalent about Final Fantasy 15 as a whole. I think going back to it, and I honestly, because I played through the original and then I tried going back through the Royal Edition with all the with all the content adds. And it's just like the differences are so jarring that you like, if you go back trying to relive the original experience, you can't, and if you try to go in to experience the new content from a fresh perspective, it's just like the differences in gameplay are just so fucking jarring.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
being able to play between
let's face it, Final Fantasy,
it doesn't mesh well.
No,
is
it
my
does,
problem.
not. It does not. And let's face it, Final Fantasy didn't become a fully action-oriented game until 16. And surprise, that's because they brought in the guy from
some
DMC.
debate there.
Yeah,
because the ability bars are closer to your ability toolkit that you would have in Final Fantasy 14, which, shock, it's the FF14 team that made the thing.
Yeah, and then you get the guy behind DMC doing the combat.
So I don't need this advertisement, thank you.
Yeah, what the hell? What is this?
I don't know,
man. So it's one of those, it's just like, I would love, I know it's never probably going to happen ever again, but I would love Final Fantasy to go back to being a turn-based, which my only hopes are for that ever going to be are a Final Fantasy Tactics remake. And
so that's stepping into the range of things that are kind of turn-based games but are not turn-based games, because Tactics is a tactical RPG, which is technically different from a strategy RPG, because there are strategy tactics RPGs.
There's some turn-based aspect to Tactics, but also too, I was like,
I mean, Tactics is turn-based. It's not incorrect to say.
You give me this remake to Final Fantasy IX that's been going around buzzing for years now, that I'm like, but they say they're gonna remake it, but I'm like, remake it in the aspect of how? Like, remake it just... I don't know, man. Like, just Final Fantasy VII?
Have someone other than Tetsuya Nomura touch something and give it to someone who cares.
But, yeah, so that was, like, my whole thing about, like, I felt that would be a quote-unquote death of the turn-based for Final Fantasies. I wouldn't say it was a death. I just feel they lost touch with what they wanted.
Well, no, I mean, or what they were. The most legitimate death of turn-based games is within the Final Fantasy franchise, because he went from FF10, which had the most standard, like the most archetypical form of turn-based RPG, with your standard party system and active swapping party members, and like the turn bar in the upper side of the screen, so you can plan strategically about how and who is going to attack. But functionally, every single game after that wanted to stray away from the turn-based standard, and they just did this weird hybridization of of the things that the series is known for, but we're changing it up because we have to change from turn-based RPGs. It's not like we have a guaranteed fan base that we could just, keep making new products for. It's, fucking /s. But it's weird. It's weird that they chose to,
especially
switch. I understand like stagnation from a development standpoint. Like, you can only make a particular system one way or another, and you want to try to do something else that's different over a long enough period of time. And that's fine, you just don't have to make that a Final Fantasy game. Square Enix is known for all of the other spin-off franchises that Final Fantasy has essentially funded.
Yeah.
Make a different game. If you're gonna make Final Fantasy, make Final Fantasy as we know it. And I mean, that can also be seen as a little reductive. Hey, ambivalence, it's what we're here for. It can be seen as reductive to say that, because, like, why can't Final Fantasy also be an action game? Why can't we have a better DMC in Final Fantasy 16 than in Bayonetta 3? But at the end of the day, there's expectations for what the identity of Final Fantasy is. Yeah. And, 11 onward doesn't actually kind of meet that criteria in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And MMOs aside, 11 and 14, they are what they're intended to be, MMOs. In terms of like mainline single player Final Fantasies, yes, I feel like they never quite hit that mark. They like never quite hit the mark of wanting to reach this potential of, yes, we have an action based, like a faster based gameplay mechanic rather than having our turn based, I wouldn't say even stagnant gameplay, but something that bridges that, like, where it's like, oh yeah, we're moving forward from this static gameplay to more engaging. But I felt like they never actually hit that mark, because even pushing the line of this engaging gameplay still felt a little weird, because like I'm not really that engaged still.
I mean, if we want to talk about stagnation in turn-based gameplay, I think the best thing to talk about is fucking Pokemon.
Absolutely.
Because it is like there what can you do with Pokemon? Pokemon has become a joke in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because the Pokemon series and franchise is I guess I'll just play the ZA trailer. Never mind, it's 23 seconds. I forgot. They don't care about Zygarde. All right, here's the longer trailer. But yeah, Pokemon has stagnated so heavily over the last like 10 or so years. It is the most successful media franchise on the planet. That is like not debatable in any way, shape, or form.
There's 100%.
Like the marketing machine that is Pokemon and the merchandise machine that is Pokemon is like rivaling the Bible on its worldwide notability and money creation. Which is a dumb thing to say, but like, you know, you look at you can take a Pikachu and put it in front of any child in the world and 9 out of 10 will know what the hell that is.
Yeah.
But functionally, Game Freak, who develops Pokemon, has had for a solid 15 years had the excuse to not have to evolve the standard gameplay of Pokemon because it was locked to portable hardware for the majority of the series' lifespan.
Yes.
They were doing basic, you know, RPG Maker style grid-based, turn-based RPGs, which had arguably strong creature design and that got weaker as we went on. But then, you know, you had representatives from the company saying that it was due to limitations of the hardware because they tried to push to 3D too soon, and they were claiming that most of their dev time was spent in making 3D models they didn't have experience with when we were doing the jump to X and Y. But at the end of the day, Pokemon has had the excuse in that no matter what the quality of the game is, it will sell 1 billion copies. So they don't put the effort that they should in. It's the reason why, to this day, Pokemon Violet and Scarlet run at like 20 frames a second at best.
Atrociously is what you mean. They run atrociously. Like
they run
can't
like
have.
shit.
They can't
run
run
with
standard. More. Like there is literally a cap to how many polygons or how many actual models can be on screen before it just eats its own ass, and you can physically see it where it's like, okay, 1 spawns in, 2 spawns in, you're fine, and then suddenly you reach that magic number and you just see everything start skipping frames.
We're dealing with like there's fucking like geometry pop in with the environment. Like these are problems that were solved at the end of the PS2 era. You're telling me that like the Switch is not the most magical piece of hardware in the world, but it's stronger than a PS2, man.
Yeah.
Like you're telling me that you can't figure out this thing that has become like just the basic understanding of what things should play at, and like you're subpar. You are so subpar, and you have all of the money in the world. I do not understand how you can go this long without meeting industry standard.
Yeah.
Because there are single person indie teams that are releasing games that are, let's say, just for the sake of it, Pokemon ripoffs that are just running better, made by a single person. You're telling me that the studio that is connected to the company that has the most successful, highest like income merchandise products across any medium, you're telling me that company can't put the extra effort in to make a game fucking run at 60 frames on hardware where other software can do it?
And you want to know what's even crazier than that is that they're actively fans of the Pokemon community that have made their own mods and run way better than even the Pokemon games themselves. And it baffles me too when I see people actively put in the work for even making like the older game mods, like as we mentioned, like, you know, the Radical Red mod, the Emerald mod, I forgot what it's called, but people have
Are you
actually
talking
gone
about
back.
Pokemon
you-
Uranium, which was technically made within RPG Maker, but it's using all the assets
No,
with its own
There's
unique art
oh no,
from
it's
Emerald
called
onward.
It's called Emerald Rogue. So it plays like a roguelike.
Okay.
But
Okay.
essentially, the thing is, the fans themselves have actively gone back and made all the sprites for even the Pokemon that weren't in that generation. And I'm like, and you mean to tell me the Pokemon Company couldn't have done that ever? Or even with some of these 3D ones where people were modding Sword and Shield and all that. I was like, how is it that the fans are able to make these run better? Like, you guys have no fucking excuse. Because if people are figuring this out on their own, what is your guys' excuse when you have a damn near nigh infinite goddamn budget to make these run all
See,
together?
that's the problem, is that Game Freak doesn't actually get any of the budget that the Pokemon Company has as its income, even though like it should, because the games are what bring that money in.
Yeah,
Because nobody's going to care about Vanillish if
Yeah.
it wasn't a meme Pokemon in the game that it came out in.
yeah. And I mean, I know sometimes too. Like I've heard that where it's like the games are one of like the last thing the Pokemon Company actually care for, because they make the majority of their money from A, the trading card game, and B, selling plushies. The
Well, why
games
the
are
fuck would you care about whether or not Scarlet or Violet runs above 30 frames baseline if you can sell a life-size plushie of Gardevoir to psychos for $500?
exactly.
Or most recently, the Evolutions have all gotten life-size plushies, which
Yeah.
let's
It's like-
not go into the copy
Let-
pasta for
let's
Vaporeon.
sell a $60 game, or we can sell this fucking plushie that someone will buy, which is the equivalent of selling this game 6-7 times over.
And will
It's like-
only ever make enough to, just immediately sell out and disappoint everyone involved with it.
Yeah, and it just sucks because it's like, obviously we know the Pokemon Company is well aware that people are gonna buy the game regardless of how it runs. That's the sad truth, though, is that it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, they know their fan base is gonna want these games whether they run well or not. People just want a new Pokemon, and that's the
They
thing
know
that
that their
sucks.
install base is like a percentage of the world population, regardless of how much effort they put into it. But the majority of their original fan base, the people that grew up with the franchise, are starting to get to the point where it's like, I only have so many hours that I'm not forced to work 2 jobs to afford rent.
Yeah,
And I spent, now the standard is shifting to $80 minimum for a Nintendo game. You're
is
telling me
even
I spent
worse.
$80 on this thing that runs at 16 frames a second and can only load in 5 models before it drops even further?
yeah, and that's if all the bottles loading correctly. Because sometimes
Which
the
they
models
won't.
load in and they are like, nah.
Because you're
like-
dealing with like Atelier Maruru degrees of like PS2
And-
trees everywhere.
Like, can I tell you, like, for instance, with Pokemon ZA, I absolutely, like, forgot that this was a thing that's coming out this year, mind you. And I'm just
I don't know if this is coming out this year. I'm gonna be real.
Like,
I think
I
the
had-
current state of things is really anything coming out on the Switch 2 is going to be
That's
up in the
true.
air.
it's like, I had no sense to be like, oh, yeah, I want to get this game. I played Scarlet and Violet, and I beat that game through, and then I was just like, I don't want to play these games anymore because these games don't feel right to play. Like, they just suck.
Yeah, and the
Like,
post game
outs-
is just kind of garbage.
And then you have to pay whatever for the DLC to get the rest of the game.
$80 for the season pass.
And it's just like, what are we doing here, Pokemon? It's like,
Or was
I
it
don't have that.
$59.99 for the season pass? I think each of them
I
were released
think-
for 40 or some
Yeah.
shit like that.
Something like that. But it's just like, why am I gonna cough out more money on these games that still, to this
But
day,
first party Pokemon games
run
are
well.
just straight up the reason that, like, and they're the exemplar of the at least on the industry standard, because people are going to look to what is like technically the most profitable franchise as like the idea of like, oh well, look how little they have to do to make $1 billion. Of course we're
Yeah.
going to go a completely different dynamic because
It's like
like
Pokemon-
it's not going to work.
give me a
for
new
us.
Pokemon Conquest. How about that?
Dude, Pokemon Conquest
Or
is
re-release Pokemon Conquest. Goddamn
if
it!
anyone has in the chat has not seen Pokemon Conquest is a tile-based Nobunaga's Ambition, but
Tactics
with
game.
Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's a tactics game, and it's a tactics game that has like 30 plus additional storylines after you beat the original like main story. Literally every single face character in that game gets their own like secondary playthrough scenario. It is the most insane amount of content in a Pokemon game, in a Pokemon related game that like I've ever fucking seen. It's nuts.
Absolutely. Like the
Pokemon
resource
Conquest
management,
is the shit. Emulate that shit. It's amazing.
like the resource management in that game, the fact that you get to conquer other like territories, and then you have to set back Pokemon or set back like leaders and all that.
Also, no, I don't know why I'm playing the Spanish or Italian version of this trailer.
I'm pretty sure that's Italian.
Yeah, it's Italian.
And then the fact is that you can set your defenses in case someone else attacks your territory. Just like there was so much to that game that I was like, why aren't we doing this, Pokemon? Oh, because they didn't make that game.
They didn't make enough physical copies for it to be profitable.
Oh, it's the Pokemon curse. Every actual good Pokemon game, Pokemon Company didn't actually make.
Well, yeah, it's not made by Game Freak. Like, look at the best-selling, or like the fan favorites that they're bringing in the GameCube emulator with XD Gale of Darkness and Coliseum.
Yeah. Absolutely. Even the Pokemon Stadium games weren't theirs. And Pokemon Stadiums are so revered, like, as some of the best games because people loved enjoying them, like playing them in terms of the battle, the mini games, and like how you can do your own little gym journey in there, like. But then I play the actual Pokemon games, and you're just like, why do these feel so lackluster? Like, there's minimal... Even some of the animations, it's just like, did you even try?
Okay, we can literally spend, like, days ragging on Pokemon, or we can we can continue on.
Yeah. We can press forward. We just
There's a good game you wanted to talk about, that, you know, takes that classic vibe and brings it back in a good way.
Exactly. Like, this was one of the first games I had streamed ever, which was Super Mario RPG Remaster. Can I tell you, when I first saw this game get announced, I only thought it was a port. And I was okay with that. I was like, hell yeah, I will play the... Because for those that don't know, I
wasn't okay paying $60 for a port. And I'm still that's the thing.
Okay, I didn't know. Well, obviously, they didn't announce the price at first. I just saw the game being announced, and I was like, "Are we getting a port of this?" I was like, "Hell yeah!" This is
my third favorite Mario game, guys.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, for those that don't know, all the Paper Mario games stem from this game. This was the original game where SquareSoft, I should say, and Nintendo essentially said, hey, take a Mario game and make it Final Fantasy, but with a little added caveat of the jump or the timed mechanics, because this is one of those games where it was first introduced where you can negate certain damage or certain attacks if you timed it correctly, or you could do more damage.
There's attacks where it's like there's certain interactives that you can do to make the attack more effective, right?
Yeah.
Or was that just Thousand Year Door?
No. All of them have it. So in this game, like for instance, Mario uses two weapons, either a hammer or a shell. So with the shell, if you go to attack with the shell, he pretty much like winds up, and you can time it so where he kicks it extra hard essentially, and he does more damage. Or with the hammer, as he's swinging, if you time it, he does more swings. So that mechanic was already built into the game from the get-go, and it's the same thing with everyone else. Like Geno does his Geno beam, and honestly, Geno, again, one of the greatest characters ever, never been seen again after this game, except for a trophy in Super Smash Brothers.
Well, he was a Mii costume.
Oh yeah, he was a Mii costume.
Smash Brothers in the final update.
Yeah, again, this was one of those games. Again, seeing the remaster, it was one of those where I was like, it gave me exactly what the original was with the new fresh coat of paint, the new tweaks to the quality of life, which made some of the inputs a lot cleaner, and it felt better. Like, you felt that you weren't missing time, because the original game was kind of notorious with its timing, that you're just like, holy fuck, like I don't understand, like I thought I hit this, and no, like you completely miss it. Here there's indicators. At first it tells you, it's like, oh, this is the timing, so it naturally lets you learn the timing little by little. Then at some point, those indicators disappear, or to the point where I didn't even realize that they had disappeared. I was just already on top of it, like, oh, I understood the timing. I understood the pace to it. And then this game also adds to, you see that bar or that circle bar on the bottom left. They added what they call these tri attacks, which are essentially our super team up moves, which weren't in the original game.
Exist in the original?
They weren't in the original. But this game is essentially, to me, what I wouldn't say a perfect remasters, but it's a damn near, like, it hits all the marks of what what I would expect from a remaster, where they're not touching any of the original story, they're not changing too much of it, they're just updating everything. They're giving it this new breath of life, where it's like, oh man, like, this was the experience I remember back then, and it's still letting new audiences play this classic title in a new way, where it's just like, oh, this game is actually, and of course everyone's like, if you've ever played a Paper Mario game, this is where it stems from. This is where it all started. And again, from what I remember, they did say there was supposed to be a sequel to this, but things kind of, fell off with Square and Nintendo. That never happened. But eventually we did get the Paper Mario games, which, again, those games are some of the best Mario games around too, excluding Origami King, but neither here nor there. But yeah, this game for me was one of those, like, it hit home because it felt exactly, again, going back to how I felt with Sea of Stars, like when I first played it on the Super Nintendo. I was just like, holy shit, I love this experience so much. The jokes were there, they all hit. Everything about the game just gave me that nostalgia, but not just for nostalgia's sake. It gave me that same, where I wanted to keep playing it, because I was like, oh, this feels amazing. Even though I already knew the story and I knew what was going on, just having that fresh quality of life gameplay, and even just relearning certain things where they added in certain, like, little quests that you couldn't do in there. And then, of course, just learning, as I mentioned, traveling around, seeing all the characters, learning about.
So you played the remake. I have one question.
Yes.
Is the Final Fantasy secret boss still in there?
Correct.
Okay, good.
He's still in. It's still in the game. That's one thing I'm glad they didn't get rid of. Is that there is, of course, because it's Squaresoft and they're at the height of their RPGs on the Super Nintendo. There's a secret boss in the game that is literally just a nod to Final Fantasy.
It's just a Final Fantasy endgame design.
Just
it's crazy.
Yeah. And
for that time frame in a Mario game.
Oh yeah.
And the only other thing I have to say about the Mario RPG franchise is, I mean, RPG original, it set the tone. Thousand Year Door was the last time that they let an exterior studio do writing for a mainline Mario title.
Yes.
And it is amazing and crazy, and there's shit in there that, like, you would not expect and probably shouldn't be in a Mario game, but it added to the overall quality of its narrative. The systems used here were also used in Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is my favorite Mario RPG.
Oh, no, yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot about the Superstar Saga. I've never actually played the Superstar Saga games.
It's a good one. You should play it.
I wanted to play the new one that came out, Brothership. I had seen plenty of games.
I don't know, man. I feel like if I type Brothership into a stream title, I'm gonna get banned in 3 different platforms.
If you type in Mario Brothership, it'll pop up. Obviously, I'm just saying, like, seeing the gameplay in that,
linking to a Rule 34 page is the problem.
Oh god, that's what I also love too. This mechanic, where if you timed your hits correctly, the other enemies would get hit. And I was just like, oh my god, like, this game really did push some boundaries for turn-based RPGs. And they even have a little, it's not as prevalent as it is in, like, Paper Mario and Thousand Year Door, but there's a slight little, like, mechanic that for medals. But in this case, you're not equipping multiple medals. It's like you have your weapon, you have your defensive item, like your armor, And there's an accessory that you can add on, but you can only equip one accessory. But each accessory almost is like what the metal system is like, oh yeah, this can actually boost Mario's hammer attacks, or this makes this character this much faster. There were certain items that I was like, oh, you gotta love how you can mix and match that accessory with the different characters across the board. And also too, what I love about this game, which is actually pretty funny, like we were discussing, the swapping of the teams. It's like this is one of the first times you actually see Mario and Bowser work together, and they have a sick team up attack, you know, or Bowser with Peach, and then you got Gino with Bowser. I love the whole aspect of you can play this game differently every time you play through, because sometimes there are times, or I know I've played the game, I never play Mallow, and Mallow technically is your white, like one of your white mages. Other times I'm like,
forgetting Mallow exists.
yeah. Other times I'm like,
because why would you ever swap out Gino?
Exactly, because it's like, well, why would I want him? Like, I can steamroll this entire game with just Gino. Or other times it's like, let me just do a like Bowser run, or let me just focus on this team. Like, it's so sick being able having that type of creativity for your teams, because it does.
Okay, so
change
see
the
where we are
dynamic.
time frame wise, and I agree that the Mario RPG remake was solid. But I feel like the expansion upon that is we can't just keep remaking the same game. We have to evolve past a particular point. And the thing that I feel like
true.
really kind of embodies that more than anything, that like kind of revolutionized what we expect for RPGs as a whole, much less turn-based RPGs, is Baldur's Gate 3. It is impossible to not talk about Baldur's Gate 3 when you're talking about RPGs in general, but this game exists in a weird hybridization of turn-based and a redefining of what. So the term CRPG refers to basically what the old BioWare style was, where you're like your isometric, tactical, occasionally tactical, but your isometric RPGs where you're controlling a party. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are great examples of this, but you can go into completely different genres and subgenres with like Shadowrun technically falls within this. CRPGs have been dead for a while, unless you consider all of, you know, the other things that didn't get the same limelight. Pillars of Eternity was amazing, and that was an ATB style of CRPG where you had active turn time frames with pause that were an option. Well, I mean, they were added in as an option after the fact. I think that's something that's going to be part of the final update for Pillars, or was part of the final update for Pillars 2. I never finished playing Pillars 1 because it was like I'm trying to keep track of one thing and I'm losing track of another.
Divinity and Divinity 2 also would fall into that.
Yeah, I Divinity is a big one, but Divinity became part of the standard Larian Studios kind of thing, where there is the main game and then there is everything that you do to subvert the game. There's a lot of that in Baldur's Gate 3 as well, but Baldur's Gate 3 is technically, because it uses D&D 5th edition's system as the baseline for its combat and storytelling and setting, it is technically a turn-based RPG. There are people who will argue about that. There are people who would say that CRPGs not only deserve the respect of having their own definitive designation, but that they go beyond what a standard turn-based RPG can do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think it's really just drawing lines in the sand when we're all in the same box, you know? But yeah, no, this game brought back a franchise that we thought was dead for good. If you told me before the launch trailer of this game that Larian Studios, that made Divinity as an answer to the fact that there was no major Baldur's Gate or game similar to Baldur's Gate for years, that they got the rights to make the sequel to the official D&D CRPG franchise, I would not have believed you.
Yeah.
But they did, and they knocked this shit out of the fucking park.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Game of the Year, obviously.
Well, yeah. Fucking swept every award through every award ceremony it was nominated for anything in.
Pretty much.
It is peak and exchanging, what we expect of the tropes of the franchise, of the genre, and evolving past the limitations that we set for what we expect a CRPG or a turn-based RPG to be. There's a version of this game. I'm not saying like there's different purchasable versions. There is a build in this game that you can completely subvert turn-based combat 100%. Like the stealth mechanics in this game are super unique. You can dialogue the fuck out of an entire act's worth of boss fights until the final boss of that act. There's so much here.
Yes.
And it does so much to show that we are not in this like the genre is not as stagnant as people are trying to make it seem. The justification for why you should buy your fucking turn-based hero shooter or your garbage battle royale game, and why you should keep throwing money at that, is because who's gonna make Baldur's Gate 3 until Larian comes around and makes Baldur's Gate 3, and now every single person is shaking in their boots because they're like, we cannot compete with this. This standard cannot be set because it's not practical to the current market. And it's not. But ultimately, it was made ethically. It was the most ethical example of an early access release, where the game came out and it was piecemealed out, and there were updates and adjustments made and things added over the course of years. And it became, when it hit 1.0, like an amazing full release. Like, again, it's a Larian Studios game, so each act is like a game in and of itself. But there's just so much here that just goes against all of these, all of the ideas that are being pushed about what RPGs can be and what they have been, and what the industry standard is supposed to be.
Yeah. And mind you, everyone, the majority of the games we've talked about today have all come out within the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So again, going back to like the fact that there was this death of turn-based RPGs it's a bunch of just horse hockey to me.
We're going around back to, to circle back to the thing that inspired us to talk about this. Fucking turn-based RPGs are not dead. They have never died. They've always been here. It's just that the focus and the audience has not been as prevalent as it has been, but we have these completely unignorable successes with Clair Obscur, with Baldur's Gate, with honestly with Metaphor, but people are always going to have some degree of hesitancy when it comes to JRPGs, because the internalized xenophobia in the American games industry is insane.
Yeah. I mean, if the traction sticks and Clair Obscur does get nominated for Game of the Year, that's now 3 years in a row a turn-based RPG, or an RPG in general, has been nominated for Game of the Year. So it's like, the fact of the matter is that people are just getting this, oh yeah, there's a revival to turn-based RPGs, or they're coming back.
I feel like it would be even better because this is an indie game. This is a game made by a small team in a small period of time, and it's like it has artistic merit and narrative focus merit, and it is everything that the industry does not want, because they want to sell you forever games. They want to sell you games as a service. They want to sell you subscriptions and all of this bullshit, when at the end of the day, like, we're losing out on narrative. You can have all of those things in in a different kind of context than turn-based RPGs, but again, turn-based RPGs serve as the best functioning way to platform a story.
Yeah.
And fucking, I need to pay for YouTube Premium. I swear to God.
No, and yeah, it's one of those that's just like, and two, like, the majority of these games are always complete games when they release. There's hardly ever any story expansions that come out later that it's like, oh yeah, here's this expansion if you want to get the real ending or the full aspect of the game. Like, no, these games from start to finish are the game. That's what you're getting. You're getting the full experience. It's not like I'm gonna play a game and then later on down the line they've already announced like, oh, here's the first DLC expansion, oh, here's the next DLC expansion, and it's just like, why? Like, why?
Well, I mean, this is something that we can talk about in greater detail later, but like functionally, games being completed on day one is such a rarity now.
Yes.
Like you have games like Baldur's Gate where they released an early access because the game could not have functionally existed as it released in 1.0 if it did not get the support that it got over the course of its early access lifespan. But like you have games that are launching and they're on disc, and then you go to put the disc into your disc drive, assuming that you're an old person and you like physical media like me.
Yes.
Because God forbid you don't pay for the digitized content that can get updated and like updated to the point where it doesn't exist anymore, with you not having any control over that.
That's the worst.
But yeah, like the games that like they are on disc, and this is what used to be the expectation of. This is how we want to present the product. This is how we want to present, the work. And then it's a broken fucking mess, and you need a 47 gigabyte download as a day one DLC patch, because at the end of the day, we're still pushing this nonsense workplace dynamic where people are just being ground into dust to get something out in a competitive time frame.
Absolutely.
Because God forbid you miss quarter 3.
Yeah. Seems what we're a little somewhat pressed for time, so I'll get through my next one pretty quickly. Omori. I discovered this game during the lockdown, and this is a game I recommend you because I know you would thoroughly enjoy. The story is just absolutely amazing, how it goes between this light and dark of the character going through like this depression and then going through this quote unquote happy time, or it's almost like forced happy time. But the story itself, you just have to experience. I don't want to spoil anything for you because I at some point would love to see you play this, whether it's on stream or off stream on your own time. I want you to experience this game. But the gameplay to it, I love the core gameplay to it, how you can go out, discover, you explore the world. I love this aspect of you can see their feelings. So you see how like it'll say, oh, they're neutral, some of them are angry, some of them are sad. That is essentially their status effects, and that affects how they attack. And also, there's also this kind of like hybrid mechanic of like in Undertale, you could talk to the enemies. Well, here you can do that too, but also you can talk to your other party members, which also boosts their morale depending on what character talks to the other character. Sometimes Hiro can talk to Omori, Kel, who's another character, can talk to Hiro, yada yada yada. Like there's this dynamic where you can see there's like somewhat of a combo going on there, which you can see in their attacks. And there's also like this limit break type attack too, where it's essentially just their supers that they can do. It was fantastic discovering this. It was a nice breath of fresh air again during a time where I was just like, I don't know what kind of game I want to play, like in terms of turn-based RPGs, where I kind of felt like I didn't know, like I felt like I didn't find anything that was that engaging. This game popped into my radar out of nowhere one day, just browsing around on Steam, and absolutely just captured me. And this, again, I couldn't recommend this anymore. Like I mentioned, I would love to have you play this.
I do need to. It was on the to-do list forever, but I really do need to go out of my way to play more.
Yeah.
But
Especially
if,
towards the end, like the reveal at the end of what happens. Like,
yeah, I mean, I
what,
can
like,
see from the gameplay like where it's pulling its inspiration and the unique aspects of its art style.
Yes.
Like, and I've been told by 100 different fucking people to play the game.
yes, Omocat does
you know,
great
just
work.
it's a good time. And
Yes.
Dean came and transitions into the other point that I wanted to bring up, where like ultimately we think about like what's under the spotlight, but there are games that are like hyper indie that maintain the turn-based RPG format for the sake of carrying out their story. Some of the biggest ones that like I've really enjoyed and I had to like actively push to people who like would have otherwise enjoyed it but just didn't give it the time of day because it got really low press coverage.
Yeah. You
Were
definitely
the Voice of
convinced me on
Cards
this one.
games.
You definitely
So
convinced me
Voice
on
of
this one.
Cards is like a super minimalist turn-based RPG that uses like the standard expectations of what like your Final Fantasy-esque stuff would be with your standard party. It is standard turn-based combat. You are in like a archetypical fantasy setting, except this is a Yoko Taro game, so you're dealing with like hyper expressive like tragedy, but like the game is super minimalist for like what it is. You are essentially playing a card game on on tabletop, but it is revealing a story that otherwise, you know, would take a huge degree of budget to bring to life in a modern Final Fantasy fashion. But you have really, really, really strong writing, and you have like dynamic themes that are like, if you played any Yoko Taro game, you will understand where this goes.
Yes. And for those that aren't aware, Yoko Taro's the man who's in charge or created Nier Automata, and the Drakengard game
as well. Yeah. You know, Final Fantasy XIV's best expansion, but alongside the indie scene is the hyper indie scene in the games that you know, exist using the standard of RPG Maker.
Yes.
Games like Fear and Hunger, games like To the Moon, games like, and this is more than just turn-based RPGs, but there's a whole subgenre of RPG Maker style horror games. You have Mad Father and Corpse Party and like so much more. There's so many like crazy narratives that can exist within this space because of the established expectations of the format. Fear and Hunger in particular is like a hyper grimdark, essentially like, hey, we made Berserk the RPG Maker game, except we didn't get the licensing, and we actually have a pretty crazy story to begin with. It's fine, don't worry about it. But other games, like the RPG Maker horror scene is insane. And there's like super emotional narratives that are brought in with that too. To The Witch's House, To the Moon, Mad Father. These are fucking amazing experiences. Horror like The Crooked Man. You've got both Fear and Hunger games, which are like super unique to each other, but kind of relies a lot on one's sub-narrative. So if you are able to complete Fear and Hunger, you'll get a lot more out of Fear and Hunger 2, but you can play Fear and Hunger 2 without any clue what's happening.
I think one of the more crazier aspects for Fear and Hunger is you can actively like lose party members, like main party members, to recruit other party members. Like,
and then within your party members, you can lose different like you can get permanent injuries to your party members.
This is true.
That
they can get maimed,
completely debilitate them throughout the rest of the game. Yeah, it's real. It's an experience, and if I can figure my way around the best version of the censorship mod, I might stream it at some point. But goddamn, that game is.
And what's pretty cool is, as much as we've talked about some of the bigger turn-based RPGs, these indie RPGs don't take as long to play. So it's like if you're looking to kind of break into the genre or anything like that, those would be perfect examples to get into because they don't take as long as a.
If you figure it out, you can play
turn-based,
through
yeah.
all of Fear and Hunger 1 in an hour and a half.
It's
or
true.
less if you use exploits.
I have seen that speed run where someone did it in like 40 minutes, and I was like,
yeah,
what? The
40 minutes without using exploits. The other version of that is like, oh hey, if you find these 3 debug spots, you can just beat the game in like 3.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of the bulk of what I have to say about turn-based RPGs.
Yeah.
I mean, there are games that like celebrate upholding the tradition of turn-based while also kind of evolving the visual aspects of it. Triangle Strategy and Octopath Traveler are both really great
Yes, absolutely.
versions of this idea where you're making like this beautiful art piece of the components of what once would have been just a game that, you know, Square Enix would have put out in quarter 2. But yeah, I think that
I think
the idea that turn-based RPGs were ever dead,
quote unquote dead. Yeah, as you see,
I'm glad that more people are coming back to the genre. But
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. For like we mentioned, like personally, like these games for us have existed this entire time. It's just again, it's not always everyone's, you know, bread and butter to go to, but there was never any death to them. Honestly, I can even say even up until a good mid Xbox 360 era, they were still going strong. Like one of my favorite turn-based RPGs is still locked on the 360, Lost Odyssey, which gives me a slight feeling of Expedition 33 because of that quick time event aspect in the attacks of Lost Odyssey. When I first saw that in Expedition 33, that's exactly where my mind went. I was like, dude, that's just like Lost Odyssey, where it's like you have to perfectly time the A button press or the Y button press for these attacks to keep the combo going. So it always just baffled me to hear this, like, oh, there's this revival that turn-based games are back. They're now like prevalent as ever. It's like they never went anywhere. What do you mean they're back? They were always around. Like I mentioned earlier, the games we showed off today have all been in the past 5 years, 4 or 5 years.
5 years. Yeah.
So it's like, and
Which
this
sounds
is just
like a lot.
handful.
Like that used to be a console generation, but at the same time, I feel like, you know, the post-pandemic blur within the industry, where things that were supposed to release beforehand had extra time to be polished before, or, you know, came out at just a later time frame at the, you know,
and it's
to
like
the extent of the studio.
Yeah, and mind you, this is just a smidge of what's released in terms of turn-based RPG. Just recently,
there's hundreds of games. If you want to go into like strategy RPGs and tactical RPGs, like if you want to make the argument that XCOM and all of the games that match that style are turn-based RPGs, then you can like there's entire subgenres.
Yeah,
like hundreds of games in the last 10 years that fit that particular bill. You know, turn-based games may have fallen out of popularity. They may have fallen out of the Western public spotlight, but they've never been gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I hope we've been able to enlighten on you guys that stuck around this whole time and listened to us to maybe try some of these games for yourselves. Or at least go out and support people who do play these type of games. Because, again, it never hurts to just watch them. Like, you can just watch the playthroughs of them if you don't personally want to, you know, play them, or you, whatever, can't afford to, because again, not everyone's on the same boat. Whatever it may be. The thing is, the
beauty of the platform we're currently on, Twitch.television, gives us all the opportunity to gain better insight and, you know, communicate with people who are more passionate about something that we don't have as much knowledge on. that you otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah.
Especially because my dumbass is probably going to play Fire Emblem Three Houses on here at some point, and that's going to take like 80 hours.
No. You got to go back and play Path of Radiance though.
I need to finish Path of Radiance
and then play Radiant.
Because I did go. Yeah, no, I do need to play Radiant Dawn. We're going past the point.
Yeah. But I we've said our pieces.
Here, let me stop that.
Yeah. The trailer's still playing in the back. But yeah, I think that was well enough for us. Oh, what the heck is going on here? Hello? There we go.
Yep.
No, it's my Discord.
Yeah, but I'd say that's a good end of episode 1. Do you want to completely subvert our entire plan and play some stupid bullshit like Fortnite?
Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to do.
I gotta grind those levels, man. I forgot to cancel that pass, so I have to care for 1 more month.
Of course. Yeah, let's fire it up. I'm down to throw down on some rounds.